The benefit bank is incredibly powerful because when you break down, X dollars per month, 30-hour, 40-hour week, we're really talking about less than $1 an hour by adding these benefits. Sometimes, 25 cents. You can do a lot with very, very little money.
Welcome to the Veterinary Blueprint podcast, brought to you by Butler Vet Insurance, hosted by Bill Butler. The Veterinary Blueprint podcast is for veterinarians and practice managers who are looking to learn about working on their practice instead of in their practice. Each episode, we will bring you successful, proven blueprints from others both inside and outside the veterinary industry. Welcome to today's episode.
All right. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Veterinary Blueprints podcast, where veterinary care meets practice ownership. I'm your host, Bill Butler, and today's guest is a top producing sales representative who has a legacy of fostering relationships that stretch way beyond the confines of typical practice business relationships. Marie has an extensive history in animal health, starting as a senior territory manager with Novartis, progressing to roles in Elanco, Boehringer Ingelheim, and she's been a beacon for veterinarians, providing unparalleled resources and services to improve pet health and practice owner satisfaction. Currently, she's making waves as an agency director, coach, and facilitator at Colonial Life, where she is setting new benchmarks on how veterinary practices can attract and retain top talent. I know that is a huge issue for the practices I work with. She brings to the table unique perspective on how the world of veterinary care can be augmented with some stellar business practices. So for those of you out there today looking to refine your veterinary business and practice with a grasp of some entrepreneurial facets in today's industry, today's episode is a must listen for you. So please join me in welcoming to the Veterinary Blueprints podcast, the exemplary Marie Pabst. Welcome, Marie.
Thank you, Bill. Appreciate that warm welcome.
Yeah. So you and I had an interesting connection. We got introduced from my cousin's husband, who you worked with at Novartis, right?
That's right. Yeah.
So last year I published my book, Protecting Your Veterinary Practice, and Tim got a copy of that, and he thought, man, I need to connect with Marie and Bill. So he sent us a connection request on LinkedIn, and here we are about a year later. So I'm grateful for Tim for thinking of introducing us with your new role at Colonial Life. Why don't you just tell our listeners a little bit about your background and how you in animal health, and then how you came to work at Colonial Life?
Yeah, thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm really excited for this conversation because I feel like it's a long time coming. Animal health has always been a passion of mine, and I think people get into the industry because they love animals, and then as soon as they do, they realize there is a lot more to it. 2020 definitely brought some unique challenges to animal health and the veterinary community. And so it was a really interesting time to bring some additional resources to them. And it was an opportunity for me to dig deeper in the service that I brought to my practices as their sales representative. I had started out in the industry in 2000 as a college grad and worked my way up and deepened relationships, but then realized that in order to serve my clients better, I needed to find additional resources. And I just started listening to the challenges that everyone seemed to have and dug deep, found some additional resources for them. And that's what brings us to these conversations today. Awesome.
So you transitioned out of the pharmaceutical animal health world into the insurance animal health world for Colonial Benefits. And I know that veterinarians are a big part of your practice. We collaborate on some clients together. So I don't want to dig too deep into and nerd out about insurance, because this is more of a business focus. But I think you've discovered that as we know right now, the veterinary industry is it's scrambling for talent. And so, veterinarians make up a big part of your practice with Colonial Life and what you do there. So why don't you describe your current role a little bit, what you do at Colonial Life, how you help business owners, and then we can dive into what you're doing with veterinarians specifically.
Mm-hmm. So what we saw the animal health industry facing was definitely a challenge finding, what we found in the industry was just a difficulty attracting and retaining this top talent. You're competing for talent with wages, with benefits. It's a difficult job. It comes with compassion fatigue, long hours, incredibly rewarding, but also some challenges. And so what my team does is we help support animal practices and small businesses in ways to effectively, efficiently, and most importantly, cost effectively attract and retain that talent.
If you think back, if you get in the Wayback Machine, you go back to 2005, 2010, 2015, what do you think is different about the industry now and how practices operate, how they attract team members and how it is now, so that compare and contrast between the two times?
Yeah, in the Wayback Machine, I think some of the challenges were still there. They just weren't quite as exacerbated. So the industry was definitely challenged with some compassion fatigue issues. They were looking for ways to stay competitive with some of the other corporate accounts that offered some bigger benefits. And that definitely makes it a challenge for some of our smaller mom and pop locations to compete with. So that was happening before 2020, but then you roll 2020 beyond, and I think the situation got even more challenged. Some things we thought we were doing great works. Let's clear the shelters, which was a beautiful thing for so many animals. But what we didn't realize at the time was the stress that it was going to put on the system. Anyone listening to this in the animal health field knows we're dealing with a veterinary shortage, a staff shortage. It's hard to keep up with the demand. And then sometimes we get negative client feedback because they just don't understand the pressures that the hospitals are facing.
This episode of the Veterinary Blueprint podcast is sponsored by Butler Vet Insurance. Being an insurance agent at Butler Vet Insurance, I've seen firsthand the difficulties veterinarians face insuring their practices. But did you know we wrote the book on veterinary insurance? It's called Protecting Your Veterinary Practice: Insider Insurance Secrets Every Veterinarian Must Know. It's not just a book, it's a comprehensive guide that speaks to the unique challenges and insurance solutions for the veterinary community. With over 20 years of experience from cyber liability to business auto and workers' compensation, our aim at Butler Vet Insurance is to reduce the stress of insurance for those dedicated to animal care. If you're a practice owner or manager and looking for some guidance on your insurance, follow our insurance blueprint. Discover the Butler Vet difference, and together let's put the pieces of the puzzle together. Butler Vet Insurance, reducing the stress of insurance. Yeah, the burnout, saw AVMA study from last year through one of our state associations here in Minnesota. And the burnout cycle for vet techs is, the average life cycle of a vet tech in a practice is 5 years. And so if every 5 years you're turning over your staff, that it's very hard to have some legacy talent there continuing. By the time you get them trained in, they're already on their way out the door. So, I think, we're always looking to try and, on the podcast, add some value. What are you doing with the practices and, the reps, and, you work with my insurance agency at Butler Vet Insurance, helping some of my clients, but what are you doing right now that it seems like, attracting, retaining talent's a challenge? And how is this challenge different for, as we just talked about, the micro and small businesses, those mom and pops? I think the industry's kind of got two segments now. You've got the corporate practices and larger practices, but there's still those solo vets out there, 1 or 2 vet practices that are trying to make their way. So what are those challenges, and what are you doing to assist practices, or what are they doing to differentiate themselves to help attract talent?
The exciting part about what we do is that there's a lot of rewards to it. So I think it pulls a lot of people to seek out the industry. But you're right about the burnout with the 5 years. It's not only difficult from losing a talent and skill loss for the practices, but we're also losing some relationships. And we know as important as it is, you're not just the veterinarian, you're the family doctor. So we want to keep those relationships preserved and keep people at the practice for a long time. But we have to recognize that these are people that exist outside the practice. And so what they've got is very real challenges. We've got inflation, so wages become something very difficult to keep up with. Benefits, the cost of insurance is going sky high and no sign of lessening. And then you put those things in place, and small businesses really try to find themselves like, well, how are we going to compete and how do we catch up? We definitely don't want to nerd out on insurance. I love that expression.
Yeah.
But I do find that my veterinary clients fall into, one of three categories. One, they're offering medical benefits, and those are incredibly expensive. And I do find some practices are in a position to contribute and contribute quite generously to them. And for those that can do that and the cash flow supports it, I definitely applaud them. But I would say those folks are in the minority.
Sure.
At the opposite end of the spectrum, we find practices that don't offer any benefits. And that becomes a real challenge, not just for those individuals, because I think there have some really real implications for the practice. So if we're hiring and we advertise that, here are our wages, but we can't offer benefits, well, for those candidates that need benefits, they're not going to apply. And so because we're not offering benefits, we've cast a much smaller net, and that reduces the opportunity and the talent that we can bring to our practices. In the middle, I find some practices do offer medical insurance, but when we're a smaller group, oftentimes those premiums are still very high. And so
Sure.
it's out of range for a lot of the individuals. And if those individual staff who are earning hourly wages, if it's difficult for them to make the premium, well, imagine how difficult it is for them to hit that deductible.
Sure. Especially on those high deductible plans for small groups. So, and you touched on it a little bit, the hiring crunch, where there's a lot of, if you're a vet tech with 5 to 7 years certified vet tech practice manager, you can pick where you want to go. You have the opportunity. And so, I think with the Indeeds of the world or Career Plug or whatever's out there from a hire, monster.com, any of the job hiring sites, when you're putting your ad out there as a practice, you're getting compared to all the other practices out there. And if you don't have, 401k benefits, health insurance, it's very easy for that vet tech or the associate veterinarian looking to find a job for them to screen you out because you're not competing with, the 5 other practices or 25 other practices within 10 miles that are hiring. You're in the Chicago marketplace. I'm up in Minnesota, up in the Minneapolis, Twin Cities area. And so, there's a lot of metro practices and a very high concentration, highly concentrated. And so, again, that job market, I think, is very competitive, and they can, look at the wages, but then also look at the benefits being offered as, kind of that benchmark. Do I even want to contemplate working there or not? So what have you found to be effective and affordable, because you're talking about the cost of insurance is very expensive. And I think, when a veterinarian that, we speak with, they think, oh my God, insurance, group benefits, this is going to be an insane amount of money. And usually it's really 2 buckets, right, Marie? It's health insurance and then group benefits, and they're really separated out, right?
Yeah.
Why don't you talk a little bit about the difference between the two?
Yeah. So when we start the conversation with veterinarians, we want to kind of funnel down and understand what this is going to mean to them. And so, the conversation always starts with, what are you currently offering?
Sure.
What are the needs of the team? And then for whatever you're offering, how are you implementing it? What we want to do is just see, how can we make things more cost effective, turnkey, and easier? So as we have this conversation, if you asked a large group, no one's going to raise their hand and say, I can't wait to talk about insurance, right?
Yeah.
And we can anticipate there's 2 main objections. It's going to be cost, and it's going to be effort. And
Absolutely.
I love spreading the truth that, we can dispel some myths. So on the one hand, the cost, let's tackle that first. It doesn't have to be expensive to offer benefits. And what most employers don't realize is that you can actually offer them to your employees on a voluntary basis.
Sure. So that's the difference between group benefits or voluntary group benefits. That's kind of the key thing when you're looking at offering a plan, right, as a business or a practice, is that voluntary component could mean sometimes the veterinarian's putting in money and sometimes they're not.
Yeah, and you can run the gamut. So if we're working with a business, I like to consult on a process of let's crawl before we walk before we run. And so if you're at that crawl stage, not offering anything yet, then sometimes voluntary is the best opportunity. And that's where employees can meet with a benefit counselor, learn about the policies available, and then select what works for them. If it works with them and their lifestyle, then you simply payroll deduct it. And that situation, even when it's completely voluntary, turns out to be a win for everyone involved.
Sure. Because the practice gets to say, hey, we are offering benefits. There's no out-of-pocket expense to them, and it's a la carte to the team member.
Exactly. And then that team member, they get the benefits they need. It's coming out of their paycheck, so that makes it really easy for them, not a lot of efforts. And then the benefit to the business is not only the advertising, but because it's coming out of the paycheck, we can have some tax savings as well.
And, you run the gamut of benefits, but what are the, just kind of list off 3 or 4 that are the absolute most popular that you generally put on just about every single practice that you work with?
We're dealing with a very financially fragile workforce. Most folks have about $1,000 in the bank account at any time. And we know it's pretty easy to get deep into medical bills. So first and foremost, we always start talking with employees about disability insurance, and that's their paycheck protection. That's going to give them 60% of their income, up to 60% in the event doc says you can't work and your employer confirms that you're not at work. So that's where we always start off. Accident insurance is great because it's going to help put money in their pocket in the event that they have an accidental injury that's covered. Dental is the number 2 most requested benefit, and we can package that with vision. So that's a great one to advertise.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
This episode of the Veterinary Blueprint podcast is sponsored by Butler Vet Insurance. Being an insurance agent at Butler Vet Insurance, I've seen firsthand the difficulties veterinarians face insuring their practices. But did you know that we wrote the book on veterinary insurance? It's called Protecting Your Veterinary Practice, Insider Insurance Secrets Every Veterinarian Must Know. It's not just a book, it's a comprehensive guide that speaks to the unique challenges and insurance solutions for the veterinary community. With over 20 years experience from cyber liability to business auto and workers' compensation, our aim at Butler Vet Insurance is to reduce the stress of insurance for those dedicated to animal care. If you're a veterinary practice owner or manager and looking for some guidance on your insurance, follow our insurance blueprint. Discover the Butler Vet Insurance difference. And together, let's put the pieces of the puzzle together. Butler Vet Insurance, reducing the stress of insurance. Yeah, so I know that some of the practices we were working with, some rules changed up here in Minnesota, and we were able to add on. We even did it at my practice my business. We use your services for my agency, and we put some stuff in place. When we started working together, and some real simple. It's like $2 a month term life insurance, and it might not seem like a lot, but when you see that post on Facebook where somebody passed away, unfortunately, and we need help for the funeral, and as a business owner, offering that might not seem like a big deal if you're a practice owner, but $2 per employee for a $10,000 death benefit, that's going above and beyond when somebody really needs it. And, you don't think about it. You think you kind of discount it because life insurance is usually a much bigger buy, but sometimes those employees might not have any. That's the only life policy they might have. So, go ahead, Marie.
That is a big deal, that $2 for 10,000, because that's more than the average cost of a cremation or burial. And what we want to do is spare that family the compounded agony of having financial burden on top of the grief. And I was at my Rotary luncheon today, and we always give happy dollars. And one of the business owners stood up and celebrated and said, I'm happy today because one of my employees was very ill, and we were able to fundraise $15,000 for them. Now, that's a beautiful thing.
It is.
However, what if we lived in a world where the employer put in, critical illness, cancer policies, accident? What if we had some of these basic services that meant that we didn't have to go to GoFundMe, credit cards, our friends and family?
Absolutely. So, back to the conversation of how these benefits really can help a practice with recruiting and retention. We talked a little bit about how adding, whether the employer, whether that veterinary practice owner and manager are putting together a package that they're contributing some or all of the premiums towards, or if it's a partial payment. So for practices who are looking to cast a much wider net and add value to their team, how are you seeing them do that, Marie?
Once they decide what they want to contribute, whether it's strictly voluntary and it's payroll deducted, or if they're going to contribute, they'll establish what's called a benefit bank, and they set the dollar amount for what we can afford per person, per employee. And then that employee uses the bank to purchase policies that work for them. Anything that exceeds that dollar amount is payroll deducted. Really simple process. And it's incredibly affordable. So like $50, for example, would get that person disability insurance, accident insurance, as well as that $2 $10,000 life insurance policy. But then what we have to help the employer do is communicate that. So it needs to be in all of the job postings of the benefits that you offer. And I'm a huge fan of the phrase value not communicated is value not appreciated. So we encourage our employers to make detailed line items on the pay stubs to remind them what they're getting. Oftentimes they'll create a benefit statement. What is the value of everything we provide, from free scrubs to Friday lunches, and put a dollar amount to that so that the employee sees all the dollars that are being invested in them. And then
it makes it fairly sticky working at the practice, because if they're going to leave, they've got to find somewhere else that's offering the same level, whether, like you talked about, free scrubs, free lunches on Friday, bringing in massage, chair massage, or whatever it might be, as a business owner and a practice owner, to try and keep that team that you have in place. And, these benefits, if you're, as you mentioned, value not advertised is value not given, don't keep it a secret.
Yes. And don't take for granted that they remember this or appreciate it. People get complacent, and we need to celebrate and remind them. It's almost like, you want to date your spouse, you want to date your employees, keep it fresh, keep it exciting, but also keep reminding them like why they should work here, and why they should work, why they should work here, and why you value them and why you invite them to be a part of your practice.
Absolutely. So with employee classes and benefit raises versus wage increases, so how can practice kind of shuffle money and say, okay, instead of giving a wage or a payroll increase, what can we do instead of that? So what are you seeing practices do to maximize the benefits that they're offering?
What we're seeing is the benefit bank is incredibly powerful, because when you break down, X dollars per month, 30-hour, 40-hour week, we're really talking about less than $1 an hour by adding these benefits. Sometimes, 25 cents. You can do a lot with very, very little money. And when we think about it, how excited would an employee be with a 50-cent or $1 raise? Not very excited. But when we can take that money and invest it in benefits that do have a tangible improvement, we see employees thrilled. We just had a woman yesterday enroll in dental. She happens to be on Medicaid, but the dentist that she was taking her children to, she felt like a second-class citizen. This was a policy we provided that was affordable, and she was able to go to her preferred dentist. Now, which one do you think mattered more to that single mom of 3?
Yeah.
It was the investment.
And that's one thing I think we should also mention is with these programs that you would offer in your practice, it's not just for the employees. When they meet with that benefit coordinator and they go through the process of enrolling, if they want to add their spouse or their children onto these plans, they have the opportunity to do that. Again, as the practice, you can say, I'm going to cover everything for everyone, or we're just going to cover the employee. And if the employee decides they want to add a spouse or children onto the plan, they have that opportunity, correct?
Yes, they do. And oftentimes, when you get these long tenured staff members where there's only so much you can pay them in wages, they kind of like top out at that.
Yeah.
So a couple strategies would be to establish employee classes. And that's where, you have a certain set of benefits for your staff, your team leads, your veterinarians, your managers, owners. You can actually differentiate and offer them different packages. And then another lever that you can pull is based on tenure.
Sure. So for those, the Main Street one vet, maybe an associate part-time veterinary practice with a couple vet techs and a couple receptionists or veterinary technicians out front, just offering a voluntary plan with a little bit into the savings bank might be a good idea. But for that larger 25, 30 vet practice to say, okay, we need to stratify or segment our workload a little bit so that, or our employee classes a little bit, because we've got, 3 partners and we've got 5 associates or 3 associates and then a whole host of staff. And again, with that 5-year turnover, maybe you've got a few staff that have been there 10, 11 years, but then you've got your whole crew that have been there less than 5. What you're saying is these practices can stratify and segment out who gets what benefits and how much they're contributing to each. So they don't have to look at that and go, God, I have to contribute $75 or $50 for every employee at a 25 employee practice. That seems like a large amount, but they can segment that out. Is that what I'm hearing you say on that, Marie?
Absolutely. There's a ton of flexibility into it. And when we're working with veterinary practices, oftentimes there's a consideration for, what can we offer our team for a great return but little money? You'd mentioned that $2, $10,000 policy.
Yeah, you can offer that to everyone without having to break the bank.
Yeah.
But then when you get into disability insurance, that might be a little bit different based on age and class, how long they've been around. Critical illness, I know, those get a little bit more nuanced. So some of the easier ones like dental and vision might not break the bank to offer to everyone. But then when you start to get into disability or larger life, you might want to segment out and put some classes in place for a larger practice.
Yes. I mean, we do find people differentiating between their full-timers and their part-timers. When they're working 20 hours, but still less than full-time, oftentimes we'll see that life insurance policy offered, perhaps the accident policy that's going to protect them on off the job. And really, that's a great conversation to have with your insurance broker, because we're mitigating the risk that someone's bringing that weekend energy. You want to say weekend energy. Yeah, I want some of that weekend energy.
Yeah, we want them to bring the weekend energy, but not the weekend injury.
There you go. That
right.
was the point. Yeah. So if we've got coverage for them, then their odds are not bringing that workers' comp claim.
The Monday morning work comp claim from the I got hurt on Thursday. Maybe no one saw it.
Yep. Exactly.
I've never had that happen in the insurance world that I've seen come through. But well, in closing, Marie, I think the bottom line is offering some sort of, whether it's 100% paid, where, like you mentioned, they just cover everything, or the practice in the middle that figures out what's right for their budget. What they don't want to be is that veterinary practice on the bottom end of the scale that doesn't offer anything, because in the competitive workforce right now, where everyone is desperately trying to find staff, they don't want to be that practice that doesn't have any advertised benefits anywhere. Correct?
Yeah. I mean, the bottom line is we're saying that here's what's possible. You can offer benefits at no cost to the business.
Sure.
Why wouldn't you? And it's the gift that keeps giving, because these policies are portable. Should they leave your employment, they're able to take them with them. And that's a tremendous blessing to people. So it attracts them, it retains them, and it gives them a parting gift. And you know that you're sending them off in a better place than where they were when they came to you.
Sure. Absolutely. Well, if you had one thought for a practice owner or a manager or somebody out there who's contemplated benefits, what would you say the first step is for them to kind of, hey, what do I want to, how do I get involved in this? Where should they look for that?
So, I mean, obviously this is in our wheelhouse. So I would say, schedule a brief conversation with us. It's a discovery conversation. And,
sure.
And I love encouraging people to, get curious and KNOW before you say NO.
Absolutely.
There's so much that's possible that's really going to surprise you.
No wonder you sold so much pharmaceutical stuff. You're really good at really good at that. Well, thanks so much for joining us today, Marie. I think in the current marketplace, trying to differentiate yourself as a practice is critical. And it's less about trying to get new patients and more about trying to retain the employees you have, so you can keep up the frantic pace of veterinary medicine these days. Where can people find you online? If they're out trying to find Marie online, where can they find you on a website or LinkedIn? How would they get a hold of you?
Yeah. So, my carrier of choice, I'm an independent agent with Colonial Life, but my agency is Other Centered Growth. And that's because we keep our focus on you. So it's othercenteredgrowth.com. And my direct phone number is 312-909-6468.
And we'll have that in the show notes so everyone can click on those links. And I know you're big on LinkedIn as well, so we'll make sure to have that there. Well, thanks so much for joining us today, Marie. I know I always enjoy engaging in conversation with you because I always learn something new. So I hope everyone on the podcast did as well. Thanks for joining us on today's episode, and we look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to Veterinary Blueprints. If you have any thoughts, questions, or suggestions for an episode, I would love to hear from you. Email me at bill@butlervetinsurance.com. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if you could do me a huge favor, you know it helps with the algorithm. If you can like, share, or comment on the post, leave a review, I would love it. Thanks for tuning in, and until next time.